One quiet morning, in a small-town diner, a struggling waitress fed a disabled boy with gentle Kirona-ware that the billionaire, father watching nearby, was about to change her life forever. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when John Whitmore decided to take his son out for lunch. The sky was slightly overcast, the kind of weather that matched his mood most of the time. He didn't usually go out to eat at ordinary places like diners. Most days his meals came from fine restaurants, served by private chefs, or during formal business meetings in expensive hotels. But that day, something made him want to step away from all of it. Maybe it was the way his son had looked at him that morning, his big brown eyes full of longing. The silent wish to go out, to feel like a normal boy just for a little while. Noah was 16, but he looked younger. He had cerebral palsy, a condition that made it difficult for him to move, speak clearly, or do most things on his own. He needed help with almost everything from getting dressed to eating meals. Over the years, John had hired the best therapists, the most qualified caregivers, and had spent millions trying to make life easier for Noah. But somehow, John still felt like he was failing as a father. He could offer luxury, but not what his son seemed to need most: emotional connection. Normalcy, kindness that wasn't bought with money. The diner they chose was a small place on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy. The furniture was old, but clean. The floor squeaked a little when people walked across it, and the air smelled like freshly brewed coffee and buttered toast. John didn't care about the lack of luxury. In fact, he found the simplicity strangely comforting. He helped Noah into a seat near the window where he could watch people passing by outside. A few minutes later, a waitress came to their table. She looked to be in her mid-20s, with her hair tied back in a loose ponytail and a notepad in her hand.
Oh.
She greeted them with a warm smile, not the kind that's forced or practiced for tips, but a real, honest smile that reached her eyes. Her name tag read Emily. John gave a polite nod, barely meeting her gaze. He was used to people staring at Noah, sometimes with pity, sometimes with discomfort. But Emily didn't stare. Instead, she bent down just a little so she could meet Noah's eyes. She spoke to him gently. "Hi there. What would you like to eat today?" Her tone was calm and kind, as if she truly cared about what he wanted. Noah tried to answer, but his words came out jumbled. Emily didn't flinch or look confused, simply waited patiently, then looked at John for help. "He usually likes pancakes," John said quietly. "With strawberries if they have them." Emily wrote that down. "Coming right up," she said with a nod. "And for you, sir." John ordered something simple: eggs and toast. He wasn't really hungry. As Emily walked away, John couldn't help but notice how she moved. There was a sense of purpose in her steps, but no rush. She seemed to take her time with each customer, laughing with the older couple in the corner, bringing extra napkins to a mother with 2 messy toddlers, and then checking back in on them. With gentle politeness, when she returned with the food, Noah's eyes lit up. The pancakes were stacked high, with strawberries on top and a little heart drawn in whipped cream. "For the young man," she said with a wink. John raised an eyebrow. No one had ever made food look so fun for Noah before, not even in the 5-star hospitals and elite care centers they'd been to. But the most surprising part came next. When she saw Noah struggling to lift his fork, Emily didn't hesitate. She looked at John first, silently asking for permission. He gave a slight nod, unsure of what she was planning to do. Then Emily pulled a chair close to Noah's side, sat beside him, and said, "Let's do this together." "Yeah." She held the fork gently, cut the pancake into small pieces, and began feeding him slowly. She didn't make it awkward. She talked to him between bites, asked if he liked strawberries, told him silly stories about customers who had tried to order breakfast with chopsticks, and smiled every time he managed to swallow a piece. Noah giggled softly, something he hadn't done in days. John sat frozen, didn't know what to say or how to feel. All his life he had seen people either ignore Noah or treat him with overly polite pity. This was different. This young waitress was treating his son like any other boy, like he mattered, like he was a friend. He watched in silence as she wiped a little syrup from the corner of Noah's mouth, still chatting away. Emily didn't know who he was. She didn't know she was feeding the son of one of the richest men in the city. She didn't ask for anything, didn't look at him expecting praise or a tip. Her entire attention was on Noah. Something inside John shifted. He remembered his wife, now gone for years, who had once been just like Emily, full of warmth and grace. He thought of all the business deals, the money, the investments, the people who smiled at him only because of his wealth. And here was someone doing something truly good without knowing or caring about his money. When the meal was done, Noah looked happier than John had seen him in weeks. He reached out with difficulty and touched Emily's hand. She squeezed his fingers gently and said, "You're a champ. You know that?" Emily stood up to clear the table. John reached for his wallet and placed a large bill under the plate. But he also paused for a moment. "Thank you," he said more seriously than he had ever said those words before. Emily shrugged. "Just doing my job." "No," John said, looking at her directly for the first time. "You did much more than that." Emily smiled again, not quite understanding what he meant, and walked away to another table. John left the diner that day feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, not just for his son, but for himself. At a small diner, that ordinary lunch, and that one act of quiet kindness had touched a place in him long forgotten. He looked at Noah, who was still smiling as they drove home, and made a silent promise. He would find out who that waitress was. He would learn her story. And he would change her life the way she had unknowingly changed his. Because sometimes it takes just one small act of kindness to break down the walls built over a lifetime. And John Whitmore, billionaire, father, and man who thought he had seen it, all realized he had just witnessed something more valuable than any business deal he'd ever made. Emily Carter had always been someone who understood struggle. Even as a child, she had learned to live without many of the things other kids took for granted. Her life hadn't been shaped by comforts or riches, but by the quiet strength of her mother, the laughter of her younger brother, and the love of a sister who could no longer speak for herself. She didn't complain, because complaining had never changed anything for her. Instead, she learned how to survive, how to smile, even when it hurt, and how to hold on to kindness, no matter what life threw her way. Her story began in a small 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of town. The walls were old and the roof leaked during storms, but to Emily, it was home. She lived there with her mother, her younger brother Jacob, and before tragedy struck, her older sister Lily. Lily had been born with a severe disability. Her muscles never grew strong, and her voice remained locked inside her. She couldn't walk, couldn't talk, and had to be fed and bathed every day. Emily was just 6 years old when she started helping her mother take care of Lily. Learning how to hold a spoon just right so Lily wouldn't choke, or how to read her sister's emotions from a single glance. Their father had left when Emily was 9. One morning, he kissed them all goodbye, promising to be back by dinner, and he never returned. There were no calls, no letters, just a note left on the kitchen table that said he was sorry. Emily never believed those words, she figured. He had just gotten tired of the stress, the bills, the sound of machines humming in Lily's room every night. After that, everything changed. Her mother, once soft-spoken and gentle, began to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. She worked 2 jobs and still found time to care for Lily. Emily stepped in wherever she could. She got her first part-time job at a grocery store when she was 15, cleaning floors and stocking shelves. Every dollar she earned went toward groceries or medicine. By the time she was 17, she had become more of a parent to Jacob than a sister. She helped him with his homework, cooked his meals, and tucked him into bed while their mother worked late shifts at a factory. Emily's dream had always been to become a nurse. She used to sit beside Lily reading medical books from the library, fascinated by the human body and how it worked. She didn't want to be a nurse because it sounded impressive. She wanted it because she had already been doing that kind of work her whole life. But college was expensive. There was no money for tuition, and there were always more urgent needs at home: hospital bills, utilities, food. So Emily put her dream aside and chose to work instead. After Lily passed away, when Emily was 19. The house felt empty in a way that words couldn't explain. Her sister had never spoken a word out loud, but her presence had filled every corner of their lives. Emily missed the sound of her breathing, the soft hum of the oxygen machine, even the small cries Lily made when she was uncomfortable. Her death left a hole in Emily's heart, but it also deepened her understanding of compassion. She knew what it meant to care for someone completely, without expecting anything in return. That experience became a part of her. It changed how she saw people, especially those who were different or struggling. She never pitied them. She respected them. She remembered every moment with Lily. The good ones, like when Lily smiled during music time, and the hard ones, like the nights spent in emergency rooms praying for her sister to hold on. All of it taught her patience, empathy, and strength. After Lily's passing, things didn't get easier. Her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer the following year. The illness came fast and unexpected, and though it wasn't terminal at first, the treatments were brutal and expensive. Emily worked more hours to cover the costs. She left the grocery store and started waitressing at the diner, where the tips were better and the hours more flexible. But she also picked up a cleaning job on weekends at a local motel. She rarely had time to rest, but she didn't mind. Her priority was always her family. Her younger brother Jacob was now in middle school, smart and full of dreams. He wanted to become an engineer, and Emily was determined that he would. She didn't want him to give up on his goals the way she had. Even when money was tight, she made sure he had books, supplies, and a little pocket money for lunch at school. She believed that if one person in the family could make it out of poverty, they could lift the others too. At the diner, Emily became known not just for her work ethic, but for her personality. She remembered regulars by name, brought them there. Favorite coffee orders before they asked, and always made time to smile. She didn't fake it. She genuinely liked people listening to their stories, learning about their lives. She treated everyone with the same warmth, whether they were wealthy businessmen or tired truck drivers stopping by. For pie, she never knew who might walk through those doors. That's why she didn't treat anyone differently. When she saw that man and his son walk in that day, she noticed the boy's wheelchair first. Then she saw his eyes, soft, curious, and full of life. Even though his body wouldn't respond the way most people's did, Emily felt an instant connection. It reminded her of Lily. Without hesitation, she wanted to make them feel welcome. She didn't know the man was a billionaire. He looked like someone who had money. Sure, his clothes were neat and expensive. He carried himself with a kind of quiet confidence. But she didn't think about that. So all she saw was a father who loved his son and a boy who might need a little extra help eating his pancakes. So when she knelt beside the boy to feed him, it wasn't for show. It wasn't to impress the father or earn a big tip. She had done this 1,000 times before, for her sister, for her neighbor's child. Even once at the diner for an elderly woman who had shaky hands, came naturally to her, like breathing is. She fed the boy. She chatted with him gently, watching his face light up with every bite. She didn't notice that the father was watching her closely. She wasn't thinking about anyone else at that moment, just the boy and how to make him smile. That's what kindness meant to her. Being fully present, expecting nothing in return. After they left, she cleaned the table and noticed the large tip. She was surprised, but didn't read too much into it. Some customers were generous, but it didn't occur to her that this meal would lead to anything more. She didn't know that her small act of compassion had stirred something deep in a man who had seen more money than most people ever would, but rarely that kind of warmth. That evening, she went home tired but satisfied. She checked on her mother, made sure Jacob had done his homework, and heated up leftovers for dinner. As she lay in bed that night, she thought briefly about the boy with the sweet smile. She hoped they would come back someday. She liked them, but she never imagined that they had already started a journey that would change her life forever. For Emily, life was still hard. There were bills to pay, appointments to attend, and endless days where it felt like she was carrying the world on her shoulders. But that never stopped her from being kind. It never stopped her from believing that love, in all its quiet, simple forms, still mattered more than anything else. She didn't know that her story, filled with silent sacrifices and strength, had just reached someone powerful enough to make the impossible happen. She had lived her life in the shadows, giving everything she had to the people she loved. And now, without even realizing it, she had brought light into someone else's heart. What she had done that afternoon was not extraordinary in her eyes. It was just another moment of care and a lifetime of giving. But to the man who had watched her that day, it was something rare, something pure, and soon, that small moment would come back to her in a way she could never have imagined. John Whitmore couldn't stop thinking about the young waitress from the diner. Even days after the visit, her kindness played over and over in his mind like a song stuck on repeat. It was unusual for him. He was a man who lived by schedules, surrounded by meetings, reports, and people who always wanted something from him. His life was full of noise, yet Emily's voice had cut through all of it, soft and real. It wasn't just the way she fed his son Noah, or how she smiled without effort. It was the way she made them both feel like they belonged. Even in such a simple place, that night, John sat by the fireplace in his large house, scrolling through emails on his tablet, but none of them seemed to matter. For the first time in years, business didn't excite him. Deals, contracts, and numbers felt empty. What stayed with him instead was the image of Emily sitting beside Noah, helping him eat, laughing at his attempts to speak, treating him like a regular kid. That kind of compassion that Hartet couldn't be bought or taught. It was rare. He decided he had to know more about her. Not out of curiosity, but because something deep in him told him she deserved better. She reminded him of his late wife, Lily's mother, who had once been just as selfless and full of grace. When she died, something inside John had hardened. He focused on work, trying to build a world big enough to escape his pain. But now, with a single lunch at a roadside diner, a stranger had softened that hardness. Emily had brought something back he didn't know. He had lost hope. The next morning, he asked his assistant David to find out everything he could about the waitress at that diner. David, loyal and efficient, raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask questions. Within a few hours, he returned with a full report. Malie Carter, 25 years old, single, no college education. Living with her sick mother and younger brother in a small rented house. She worked 2 jobs and had no known debts, but also no savings. Her sister had died a few years ago and her father was long gone. She had no criminal record, no social media presence worth noting, and no complaints at either of her jobs. It's just a regular girl living a very hard life. John read the report twice, and he closed his eyes and took a long breath. She didn't deserve that life. Not someone with a heart like hers. He didn't know exactly what he wanted to do, but he knew he had to do something. He couldn't just walk away, not this time. Helping people through charities or donations was easy. It was writing checks. But helping one person, someone real, someone who had touched his life in a deep and personal way that was different. A few days later, John returned to the diner with Noah. He didn't tell his son why. He just said, "Let's go for pancakes." Again, Noah smiled, excited to see Emily, though he couldn't say her name clearly. When they walked into the diner, John immediately spotted her behind the counter, pouring coffee for a customer. She looked tired, but her face lit up when she saw Noah. "There's my favorite customer," she said cheerfully, walking over to their table. Noah clapped softly, his way of showing joy. Emily knelt beside him again, just like the first time, and asked, "Pancakes again?" John watched the interaction quietly, still couldn't believe how natural it was for her. She didn't change when she saw him. She didn't act nervous or overly polite. She was just herself, kind, honest, and present. While they waited for their food, Emily chatted with Noah. She told him a funny story about a squirrel that had run into the diner once and caused chaos. Noah laughed, and John smiled too. He hadn't seen his son this happy in a long time. Emily brought their food and helped Noah eat without hesitation. When it was time to leave, John asked if he could talk to her for a moment in private. Emily looked surprised but nodded. They stepped outside the diner and John turned to her. "Emily," he said, "I want to thank you. What you did for my son the other day, it meant a lot." She smiled. He's a sweet kid. I just wanted to help. John paused. You did more than help. You made him feel like he wasn't different, and that's not something many people can do. Emily looked down, a little shy. I've been around people like him before. My sister was disabled too. I guess I just understand a little. John nodded. That makes sense? You're a very special person, Emily. She laughed softly. I'm just a waitress, Mr. Whitmore. No, you're not, he said firmly, and I want to help you. Emily blinked. Help me. John hesitated. Look, I know this might sound strange, but I have resources. I've spent a lot of my life helping people from a distance, donations, charities, foundations. But I want to do something personal this time, for you. Tell me what you want most in life. Emily stared at him, speechless. No one had ever asked her that. Not really. Most people asked what she needed or what was wrong or how she was holding up, but no one ever asked what she wanted. I don't know, she said quietly. Take your time, John replied. Think about it. And when you're ready, I'll be here. With that, he handed her a card with his personal number on it and walked away with Noah. Emily stood there for a long time, staring at the card. Part of her thought it was a joke. Maybe he was testing her. Rich people didn't just offer to help waitresses out of the blue. But something about his voice, his eyes, told her he was serious. Over the next few days, Emily carried the card in her pocket like a secret. She didn't tell her mother or her brother. She went to work as usual, served coffee, washed dishes, cleaned motel rooms, and came home exhausted. But her mind kept returning to that conversation. Tell me what you want most in life. The question echoed in her head. At night, when the house was quiet, she let herself dream for the first time in years. What did she want? Not just to survive, but to live. To go to nursing school, like she had always dreamed. To give her mother better care. To send Jacob to a good college. She wanted to stop worrying every day about bills and groceries. She wanted freedom. And she wanted to feel proud of herself, not just for surviving, but for achieving something. Finally, after a week of thinking, she called the number on the card. John answered on the second ring. Emily, he said, like he had been waiting. She took a deep breath. I want to go to school. I want to become a nurse. There was a pause. Then John said, Good, let's make that happen. And just like that, everything began to change. John arranged a meeting with an admissions counselor at a respected nursing program in the city. He offered to pay for her tuition, books, and even help with transportation. He didn't want anything in return, no publicity, no thank you post online, nothing. Just the joy of seeing her succeed. Emily was overwhelmed. She had never been given anything without having to fight for it. But John was patient. He understood. Her hesitation. Slowly, she began to trust him, opening up about her fears and hopes. At the same time, John began to visit the diner more often with Noah. Emily and Noah had developed a bond that is hard to describe, pure and joyful. Emily's presence seemed to calm the boy. And in return, Noah brought out a softer side of Emily that even she didn't know existed. John watched from a distance, feeling something warm grow inside him every time he saw them together. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, he believed in goodness again. Emily's life had been full of struggles, but she had never lost her heart. And now, because of one simple act of kindness, feeding a disabled boy pancakes at a diner, her world was beginning to open in ways she had never imagined. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. Emily's life had started to change, slowly but surely. After the call with John Whitmore, something inside her shifted. For the first time in many years, she didn't feel like she was just surviving. She felt like she was moving toward something. It was strange at first, exciting, yes, but also scary. She had spent so long putting her dreams aside that when the chance finally came to chase them, she wasn't sure if she even remembered how. The nursing program application process was detailed and time-consuming. There were forms to fill out, letters to write, interviews to prepare for. But John had already arranged everything. He'd even hired a woman named Marissa, a kind education consultant, to help Emily with her paperwork. Marissa met Emily at the diner during her breaks, bringing coffee and folders and guiding her through every step. She spoke to Emily with respect, never treating her like someone who needed pity. That made a big difference to Emily. She didn't want to be rescued, she wanted to rise. Meanwhile, John stayed in touch through short calls and texts. He didn't pressure her or try to control her. He just reminded her that he believed in her. That was enough. It gave Emily strength during moments when doubt tried to creep in. Her mother, though still weak from her treatments, had begun to smile more. Emily told her bits and pieces of the story about the man who was helping her, about the nursing school. She didn't go into too much detail at first, worried her mother might feel overwhelmed. But her mother, even in her tiredness, saw the light coming back into Emily's eyes. "I always knew you had something special," her mother said one night as they sat together in the living room. "Even when you were little, you cared more about others than yourself. That kind of heart doesn't go unnoticed." Emily blinked back tears. She had been holding them in for a long time. Jacob was excited too. When he found out that Emily might finally be going to college, he jumped up and down like a little kid. "You'll be a nurse, a real nurse," he shouted. "Can I tell my teacher?" Emily laughed and hugged him. "Yes, you can. But only if you promise to keep studying hard." "Okay, you still have to go to college too." Life at the diner continued as usual, but things felt different. Customers still came in, ordered their meals, and shared stories, but now Emily carried a secret in her heart, one filled with hope. She still worked hard, still wiped tables and refilled coffee cups with the same care, but inside she felt lighter. One morning, John and Noah walked into the diner again. By now, they were regulars, and everyone had grown used to seeing them. Emily waved from behind the counter, and Noah lit up with a big smile. He made excited sounds, trying to wave his arms, and Emily came over immediately. "Hi there, champ," she said, ruffling his hair. "Back for more pancakes?" Noah nodded. His speech was limited, but his joy was loud enough. Emily helped him settle, then turned to John. "How have you been?" she asked. "Busy but good," John replied. "I actually came to ask if you'd have lunch with me this weekend, somewhere outside of the diner." Emily raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Just want to talk," he added quickly. "Nothing fancy, just some time to catch up without coffee spills or screaming kids in the background." Emily thought for a moment and then nodded. "Okay, but only if you let me pay for dessert." John laughed. "Deal." That Saturday, they met at a quiet outdoor cafe near the city park. Emily wore a simple blue dress, one of the few nice things she owned, and pulled her hair back in a ponytail. She felt nervous, like it was her first day at school. But when John arrived, dressed in a plain shirt and jeans, her nerves eased a little. They talked for hours, about life, family, dreams. Emily shared stories about Lily, about the long nights, the hospital visits, the laughter they managed to find even during hard times. John told her about losing his wife, about the guilt he carried for not being there more during her final months. They both had pain in their pasts, but somehow sharing it made things lighter. John listened to Emily with full attention. He wasn't just hearing her words, he was trying to understand her heart. He saw how strong she was, how she had carried others for so long without anyone carrying her. He respected that, and he wanted to be the person who finally gave her the support she deserved. At one point, he leaned forward and said, "Emily, you know you don't have to do this alone anymore, right?" She looked down at her hands, unsure how to answer. "I mean it," he continued. "You've been the rock for your family, for years. But it's okay to lean on someone now. You don't have to carry everything." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away. "I don't even know how to do that," she whispered. "I'm so used to being the strong one." John nodded. "Then let me show you. Maybe someone you can count on." From that day on, their friendship deepened. It wasn't romantic, at least not yet, but it was real. They were two people who had found each other at the right time, connected not by wealth or background, but by shared pain and hope. A few weeks later, Emily was accepted into the nursing program. The letter arrived in the mail on a Wednesday afternoon, just as she was getting ready for her shift. She tore open the envelope and read the words slowly, hardly believing them. "Congratulations, you've been accepted." She screamed with joy, waking her mother from a nap. Jacob came running, thinking something bad had happened. "I got in," Emily shouted, holding the letter like a trophy. They hugged, laughed, and cried all at once. It felt like a miracle. John was the first person she called. "I got in," she said, trying not to cry again. His voice smiled through the phone.
"I
"Knew you would." He immediately arranged for everything she would need: tuition payments, books, a new laptop, even a monthly stipend so she could cut back on one of her jobs and focus on school. He wanted her to succeed, and he wasn't going to let anything get in her way. As classes began, Emily entered a new world. At first, it was overwhelming. She felt out of place among students who had come from better schools, who had more money, who didn't have to work after class. But she reminded herself why she was there. She remembered Lily, her mother, Jacob, and slowly, she found her rhythm. She studied hard, stayed up late reviewing anatomy terms, and practiced with dedication during her clinical sessions. Her professors noticed her passion, her kindness with patients, and her calm under pressure. One even told her, "You're going to make an incredible nurse." Emily was still working part-time at the diner, though only on weekends now. She didn't want to leave it completely. It had been her second home. The regulars still came, and they asked about school, about her family, about her future. She was no longer just the waitress. She was Emily, the nursing student, and they were proud of her. Her mother's health started to improve too, with better nutrition, more rest, and regular checkups. Thanks to John's help, she had more energy than before. She even started taking short walks outside again. Jacob was doing well in school, and he had started drawing pictures of Emily. In a nurse's uniform, he taped them to the fridge, one after another, with captions like, "My hero and best sister ever." Emily kept going. She didn't stop, didn't slow down. She still had fears. What if she failed a test? What if her mom's illness came back? What if all this was too good to be true? But then she'd remember Noah's smile, John's belief in her, her sister's memory, her own strength, and every time she walked into the hospital for her training, wearing her new uniform and holding her books, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. She wasn't just changing her life. She was honoring everyone she had ever loved. And the best part was, her journey was still unfolding. Emily stood in front of the hospital mirror, wearing her white nurse's uniform. Her name badge gleamed on her chest, and her hair was tied back neatly. She couldn't believe it after so many struggles, long nights, tears, and sacrifices. She had finally made it. She had passed her final exams with high marks, and today was her first official day as a registered nurse. It felt like a dream, one she used to keep buried deep inside because life had been too hard to hope for something this big. She thought of her mother, who had tears in her eyes that morning when Emily left the house. "You did it," her mother had whispered, hugging her tight. "You did what you always wanted." Jacob had drawn a picture of her again, this time with her holding a stethoscope and wearing angel wings. "You're a nurse and an angel, Emmy," he had said proudly as she walked through the hospital corridors. Memories flooded back, cleaning motel rooms, carrying her sick sister into clinics, working double shifts at the diner, and smiling at customers, even when she was exhausted. Life hadn't been fair, but Emily had never given up. And now, everything felt worth it. During her shift, she cared for elderly patients, helped a little girl with a broken arm, and even comforted a nervous teenager before surgery. Her kind smile and soft voice made everyone feel safe. Her colleagues quickly noticed how naturally she connected with people. Doctors and senior nurses gave her small nods of approval throughout the day. When she took her lunch break, she sat outside on a bench in the hospital garden. The sun was warm, and she closed her eyes for a moment, just breathing it all in. She didn't know how long she sat there before she heard a familiar voice. "Is this seat taken?" She opened her eyes and smiled. John Whitmore stood in front of her, holding a cup of coffee in each hand. She moved aside, laughing softly. "You didn't have to come here," she said. "I wouldn't miss your first day," he replied. Handing her a coffee, they sat quietly for a moment, sipping their drinks. I saw the photo Jacob sent me. John said, "Nurse with angel wings." He's not wrong. Emily smiled, touched. "You're really here," he added, looking around. "You did it." "I still can't believe it," she whispered. "It feels like someone else's life." "No," John said gently. "This is your life now, the life you earned." Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," he replied. "You had the strength the whole time. Just helped open the door." They finished their coffee in silence, watching the wind move through the trees. Emily felt at peace. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't worrying about what came. Next, she was exactly where she wanted to be. Later that week, Emily received a phone call from the director of the hospital. He invited her to a special fundraising event. "We'd like to highlight stories that inspire people," he said. "We'd be honored if you'd share yours." Emily hesitated. She didn't like being the center of attention. But then she thought about how many people out there were like her, working long hours, living paycheck to paycheck, dreaming silently while carrying heavy burdens. Maybe if she told her story, it would give someone else the courage to keep going, so she said yes. The event was held at a large hall filled with doctors, nurses, donors, and community members. Emily wore a simple dress and stood backstage, nervously holding her speech. John and Noah were sitting in the front row, smiling up at her. When it was her turn, she walked to the stage with her heart pounding. The lights were bright, and the room was silent. She took a deep breath and began. "I was a waitress, a motel cleaner, and a full-time caregiver. I never thought I'd be standing here, speaking to all of you as a nurse, but here I am." She spoke honestly, without trying. To make herself sound like a hero, she talked about her sister Lily, about losing her, about the pain of watching someone you love suffer. She shared what it was like to work so hard and still feel stuck. She told them about the day she met a little boy named Noah in a diner, and how his smile changed everything in that one moment. She said, her voice shaking, led to a man with a kind heart offering me a chance to chase my dream. When she finished, the room stood in applause. People were wiping tears, clapping loudly, deeply moved by her story. Emily looked down at John, who had Noah in his lap, and smiled. This wasn't just her moment. It belonged to everyone who had helped her, believed in her, and stood by her. After the event, people came up to her, telling her how much her words meant. Some wanted to help others the way John helped her. Some just wanted to thank her. Emily felt something new in those moments. Not just pride, but purpose. Her story had power. It could shine light into someone else's dark place. Months passed, and Emily became one of the most trusted nurses in the hospital. Her calm nature and kind heart made her a favorite among patients and coworkers alike. She was even asked to mentor new nursing students. But even as she grew professionally, she never forgot where she came from. She still visited the diner sometimes just to say hello. She helped her mom manage her medicines and encouraged Jacob with his studies. And every Sunday, she met John and Noah in the park. Their bond had grown strong, and Noah now called her M, his special nickname for her. One Sunday afternoon, as they sat on a bench watching Noah play, John turned to her. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "About what?" Emily asked. "About starting a foundation. Something small. At first, for people like you, hardworking, caring people who just need a little help to reach their dreams." Emily's eyes widened. That's a beautiful idea. And I want you to help me run it," John added. "Who better to lead it than someone who's lived that life?" Emily's heart raced. The thought of helping others the way she had been helped, it felt right. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I'd love to." Together, they launched the New Hope Foundation. They kept it simple, just one mission: to find people with heart and help them build the future they deserved. They offered scholarships, job training, and support for single mothers, disabled children, and young people trying to go to school while working. Emily personally met many of the applicants. She listened to their stories, saw herself in their eyes, and gave them the same chance she was once given. It became more than work. became her passion. John watched her from a distance, proud of the woman she had become. He saw how her strength inspired others, how her kindness healed more than medicine ever could, and slowly, something changed between them. What began as gratitude turned into deep friendship, and that friendship blossomed into something more. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, they sat together in the quiet office. The city lights glowed through the windows. Emily leaned back in her chair, tired but content. "You know," she said softly, "I never thought my life would look like this." John looked at her, his eyes warm. "Neither did I." They sat in silence for a moment. "I'm glad I walked into that diner," he said. Emily turned to him and smiled. "Me too." A few months later, they shared their first kiss under the stars, with Noah laughing nearby, tossing petals from a flower. Emily had given him. It wasn't part of some big plan, it just felt natural. It's like everything was finally falling into place. Their story wasn't one of fairy tales or riches falling from the sky. It was a story of pain, kindness, courage, and second chances. Emily had changed John's life as much as he had changed hers. And together, they built a future, not just for themselves, but for many others who needed a light in the dark. Emily, once a tired waitress feeding a disabled boy with love and patience, had become a symbol of hope. She proved that even small acts of kindness could ripple out and change lives. And as she walked through the hospital halls each day, smiling at patients, holding hands during tough moments, and guiding new nurses, she carried with her the truth she had learned along the way. Sometimes the biggest changes in life begin with the smallest moments, like pancakes at a diner and a stranger who decided to care. The next hearing was scheduled after 10 days. During those 10 days, word began to spread through the court building. Some clerks and junior lawyers whispered stories about a woman in a cotton sari who had stunned the judge with her knowledge. They spoke of how she quoted law sections without looking at a book, how she arranged her documents better than some practicing lawyers. People were curious, even a little amused. Some didn't believe it and thought the story was just an exaggeration. But many were waiting eagerly for the next hearing. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was more crowded than usual. Some law interns had arrived early and taken seats in the back row. 2 reporters from local newspapers were also present. Even a few advocates who had no cases that day came in just to watch. Everyone was waiting for the Sariwali lawyer to arrive. Nirmala entered quietly, just like last time. Her sari was clean but old. She walked in with the same calm expression and held her file close. She did not look left or right. She sat on the same wooden bench in the front row and waited for her case to be called. Some people gave her curious glances. One intern nudged another and said, "That's her." The other nodded with wide eyes. After a few cases were finished, the court clerk finally called her case. She stood up and walked to the front. The judge this time did not roll his eyes or smirk. He looked serious. He adjusted his glasses and looked directly at Nirmala. "Madame, please continue from where you left off." Nirmala nodded and opened her file. She cleared her throat and began speaking in her calm, soft voice. "Sir, last time I submitted evidence that the mutation of land in favor of Rattan and Surjeet was done illegally, without my consent and without any legal proof of their claim. Today, I have brought an additional Documentan RTI reply from the Tehsil office." She handed the document to the court peon, who gave it to the judge. He read it carefully. "This reply confirms that there is no record of my signature or application in the mutation file. The officer who processed the mutation did not verify the original ownership or even notify me. This is a direct violation of due process." The judge nodded slowly and looked toward the opposing lawyer. "Do you have anything to say?" The lawyer stood up with a proud expression. He was a senior lawyer now, hired by Rattan and Surjeet after they realized the case was getting serious. He wore a shiny black coat and carried a leather briefcase. He cleared his throat loudly and began speaking in a theatrical voice. "My lord, this woman is not a trained lawyer. We must not forget that. She may speak confidently, but law is not just about books or documents. It's about proper procedure. And only trained professionals can understand that. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you have any objection to the evidence she just submitted? The lawyer hesitated for a moment. Well, he questioned the validity of the RTI document. Could be manipulated. Also, even if the mutation was done without her consent, my clients have been in possession of the land for over 4 years now. They are the de facto owners. Nirmala quietly interrupted. May I respond, sir? The judge gestured for her to speak. Possession without legal title is not ownership. Just because someone lives on land doesn't mean they own it. Also, I have already filed a complaint for illegal occupation, and the police have acknowledged it. I have attached a copy of that complaint as well. The lawyer rolled his eyes and said loudly, My lord, this woman is just repeating legal words she doesn't understand. Let's be honest. She's not a lawyer. She should not be allowed to argue like this in a court of law. A quiet wave of murmurs went through the courtroom. Some people frowned at the lawyer's tone. Others watched the judge to see what he would say. The judge leaned forward and said in a calm but firm voice, Advocate Sharma, the law allows any citizen to represent themselves in court. It's because someone speaks simply does not mean they are wrong. If you have a valid legal objection, present it. Otherwise, do not interrupt. The lawyer stepped back, slightly embarrassed. Nirmala continued. This time a little more firmly, sir. My husband and I bought that land together in 2007. We built our small home there. We grew vegetables, raised chickens, and lived peacefully. After he died, I was still living there. One night, while I was at my sister's house, Ratan and Sergi broke the lock and moved in with some goons. They paid a corrupt Patori and changed the records. I was thrown out of my own home. I have been living in a rented room ever since. The judge's face tightened. He looked at the papers again. Do you have witnesses who can confirm this? Yes, sir. My neighbor, the old postman, and the shopkeeper from the corner. All saw what happened. I have their written statements here. The courtroom was completely silent. Everyone was listening carefully now. Even the court clerk, who usually looked bored, was paying attention. The judge turned to the opposing lawyer again. Do you deny these events? The lawyer looked unsure. We cannot confirm them, my lord. Then I will be calling the witnesses on the next hearing. He made a note in his register and gave a date for the witness hearing. As the case moved to the next phase, the atmosphere in the courtroom changed completely. People no longer saw Nirmala as just a simple woman. They saw someone who had been wronged but refused to give up. They saw someone who had taught herself the law just to fight for justice. They saw someone who remained respectful and calm even when insulted. After the hearing, as Nirmala stepped outside the court, a young man followed her. Madame, I'm a law student from DU. Can I ask you something? She looked at him kindly. Yes, Beta. How did you learn all this? Your arguments are better than what we're taught in class. Nirmala smiled gently. I just read and watched and listened. I didn't understand everything at first. But slowly, with practice, things became clear. Did someone guide you? No. I asked questions at the district library. A retired lawyer in my village once gave me an old legal dictionary. I still use it. Another woman, watching from a distance, walked up to her. Didi, can you help me with my case too? My husband's brothers have also taken our land. Nirmala looked at her with compassion. I will try. Bring your papers next week. I'll see what I can do. Soon, a small group had formed around her. People were asking questions, seeking advice, thanking her for speaking up. Nirmala wasn't used to this attention, but she answered each question patiently. Back inside the courtroom, the judge remained seated for a moment after the case ended. He tapped his pen on the desk and stared at the name Nirmala Verma in the case file. She's different, said quietly to himself. Very different. One of the clerks asked, Sir, should I mark this case for early hearing? Judge nodded. Yes, let's not delay this one. That evening, the judge sat in his chamber, looking over the documents again. He had handled thousands of cases in his career, but something about this woman's file touched him deeply. The handwriting, the clarity, the way everything was organized, it reminded him of his early days as a student, when he still believed That law was a noble profession, meant to protect the weak. For Nirmala, the walk back to her rented room was quiet. She didn't celebrate or smile widely, but deep inside, something felt lighter. The shame she had felt the first time she stood in court, the laughter, the judge's smirk, the whispers, none of it mattered now. She had spoken her truth, and people had listened. She made tea for herself in a small steel cup and sat on the floor with her books. She opened the Hindu Succession Act again and started reading a new section. Even though her eyes were tired, she kept reading, because she knew this was not just about one piece of land. It was about respect, dignity, truth, and if the law could help her protect those things, then she would keep reading until the day her case ended. She didn't want fame. She didn't want revenge. All she wanted was justice for herself and for others like her, and for the first time in years, justice didn't seem so far away.